Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Vortex, where lies and falsehoods are trapped and exposed. I'm Michael Voris, coming to you from Rome, St. Peter's Square. Next year, which is almost here, marks the 50th anniversary of the opening of Vatican II, the herald of perhaps the most turbulent time in the Church's history, as hundreds of millions of people, hundreds of millions, many of them clergy, simply abandoned the Catholic faith. They just walked out the door. But what is even more disturbing is that many who abandoned the faith, and yes, many of them clergy, actually have stayed in the Church. On the point of clergy who remained in the Church in the body but not in the heart, no doubt some of the motivation was simply financial. What exactly does a man who has lived his life as a priest or a bishop and is now in his 50s or older, what does he actually do for a living if he leaves the clerical state? The thought of beginning a career selling used cars or waiting tables or teaching sixth graders for the rest of his life isn't exactly very appealing when you've had the trappings of a house, a cook, the admiration of the people. But members of the clergy aren't the only ones who remained in the Church under false pretenses. Many of the laity who remained when the shockwaves of Vatican II hit initiated a kind of quiet pact with their counterparts in the clergy. You agree to not preach morality, Father, and we'll agree to keep coming to the Catholic Social Club each Sunday and throwing money in the plate. For the heartless laity who remained, some of them stayed on for emotional reasons, to be certain. Well, this was always my parish. My family attended here for decades. What would the rest of the family or the friends think if we stopped suddenly going? Yeah, but those are the wrong reasons. This dark cloud of self-interest that blotted out much of the light of authentic Catholicism is what those of us who are now 50 grew up under in the aftermath of Vatican II. And for many, many of us, when we most needed the Church in the madness of the 70s and the 80s, when we needed the sure and steady hand of shepherds and fathers, what we got instead was a Church becoming increasingly feminized, in the bad sense of that word, with liturgical dancers and intellectually backward liturgies and all the garbage. The doors got blown off their hinges as every kind of modernist nuttiness swamped the Church. And it must be added, stressed even, that we who are now around 50 were children, small children, when all this began and was getting ramped up. Suddenly, almost overnight, women were walking up to Holy Communion in hot pants, and men were walking up to Holy Communion in rapture with those hot pants. Catholic schools, when we 50-year-olds were students, made a mockery of the faith, and still do with rare exception from everything talked about. In one sense, thank God many of them are closing. Talk about child abuse. One sort violates the body and the psyche, while the other violates the soul. And all the while, the great purveyors of the spirit of Vatican II continued to push their idiocies, and that is exactly what they were. The denial of our blessed Lord's miracles as revealed in sacred scripture, the acceptance of birth control, the throwing open of the doors to welcome everybody around the Lord's table so we could all be sharers in the meal. Of course, all this became reflected and accelerated in the Mass that Catholics attended. Hardly a place any longer where God was worshipped. It became a laboratory for every kind of discordant theological inanity the priest and his liturgically correct, liberated nun could summon forth. Again, we 50-year-olds were witnesses to all this, and it all happened so fast in an institution as the Catholic Church where the speed of evolution is viewed as too fast. For these changes to have come about in such lightning speed was unimaginable. All three offices where we now 50-year-olds were supposed to have heard the faith, been taught the faith, had been taken over by the modernist crowd. Many of the pulpits became soapboxes for the mediocre, and brother, is that a kind description. The classrooms, from grade school to universities, became incubators of heresy, and families became hotbeds of confusion as they confronted the evils of rapidly advancing secularism. What is surprising is that there are any 50-year-olds left at all in the Church. And it is nothing more than pure grace that this is so. But there is another phenomenon, speaking of grace, that we 50-year-olds are witnesses to. It is the reemergence, slow but certain, of a church that we were taught, as more in actions than words, that we were taught as children was dead. And it is emerging from the least likely of all places, from the current younger generation, the kids who are now standing where we were standing during the eclipse of reason that followed after Vatican II. They are causing some serious soul-searching to have to be done by the various parties in the Church who tried to stamp out authentic Catholicism. they're also causing some serious soul searching to be done on the part of people like me and others, I suspect, of my same age. We are the very people, the children, who were witnesses to a Good Friday for the church, and now, through nothing more than grace and mercy, who have been mourning at the tomb and wondering who would roll back the stone, are now, through this rebirth of faith in many 20-somethings and 30-somethings, hearing the too good to be true words, "Why do you seek the living among the dead?" True, we have not seen the risen Lord, but we are hearing his angels. The mysteries of God are beyond compare and not discernible, but they do have a tangible, if still mist-like reality. All over the garden, Easter is dawning. It's still very early, and those opposed will conspire as the Pharisees did with the soldiers to stamp it out, but God will not be deterred. The eldest children of Vatican II, we 50-year-olds, born within the same year as the Council, have yet to be heard from, and what we will be singing is a resurrection song, the dark and dank of the tomb that has ruled the day since the Council's supposed implementation is finally giving way to sunrise. God love you. I'm Michael Voris.